Welcome back to another Box Score Geek Show. Sadly, Patrick Minton can't be with us. I know Brian will have some fun thing up there. I think it might be Greg Popovich. We are happy to kick Patrick off the show if Greg is willing to take a spot. We will miss Patrick. He's one of my favorite people on the show, but I will say it gives us a decent possibility I won't have to put the explicit label on the podcast this week. We've got a star-studded... Oh, go ahead, Arturo. Oh, come on. That doesn't count. That's like the Greg Popovich...
I was going to say, basically, I got my Christmas tree filling in for Patrick, and I guess I'm going to have to swear a little bit since I'm playing the heel on this podcast.
All right. Well, I was going to say you did the Greg Popovich just hack a shack immediately in the first couple minutes. So
and then sit there laughing.
Hey. He does. I love that guy. And like I said, we got to make sure we see him at Sloan. So the big thing we're going to start off talking about is the Rudy Gay trade, and then we're going to talk about the award articles we've gone over, the most improved and MVP. And I know at the end of this week, we're going to see more power rankings, so we'll probably mix it up a little there.
Yeah, power rankings should be up tomorrow, but I was going to say, so Rudy Gay. So basically, it's one of these things. It's like Mission Impossible. So Masai Ujiri, if you choose to accept this, here's your mission, right? So I'm going to give you the most impossible roster, or the second most impossible roster in the league.
To clarify for those who weren't watching Toronto, no blame for you. That's Andrea Bargnani, Rudy Gay, DeMar DeRozan, all on a team together.
Yeah, and we're going to give them to you, and you're going to have to clear the cap and actually get this team to a good place. And not only, here's the funny part, it didn't even take him till Christmas. So he managed to trade the Bargnani contract, and not only get a decent three-pointer shooter back, but he actually got a pick for it, which may actually turn up to be a lottery pick in like one of the most loaded drafts in the last 2 decades.
Point of clarification there, I believe the Denver Nuggets actually own their pick this year. From the
you're right. You're right. It's a second. You're correct. It's not a lottery pick, but they're getting a second pick in a very loaded draft. And now he managed to trade Rudy Gay basically for some decent players. I mean, they're not great players, but they're good role players for what they're doing, and it puts them in a much more flexible position. Actually, I think it makes them a much better team.
This should explain how Masai Ujiri, in just a few years as a GM, has changed expectations. I talked to Devin Dignam, our resident Canadian, who also is in theory, Toronto fan. It's been rough for him. Yeah. He was upset with this trade because he's like, I think Masai could have done better. So Masai's gotten to the point now where a trade, which a salary dump would have been fine, is depressing because Devin's like, well, he should have turned him into even more because Masai is that powerful.
Well, I mean, I think he got a couple of decent pieces back. He got a piece with potential back, and I think he got out of it. I mean, I think it's one of those things where like it was a bad marriage, and I think it's one of those things where people don't understand why we hate on Rudy Gay. This is really not about us hating the player personally. He kind of represents everything that's kind of wrong in terms of player evaluation in the league. Whereas
that's the best ever. You're like we don't hate him. He is just everything wrong with the NBA.
But again, Rudy Gay is doing the thing that he needs to do to get paid, right? So he's taking the shots because taking the shots and getting the points gets you paid. And I believe he's the third highest player in the league, I think, or no, fourth or fifth. He's in the top. He's in the top 5 or 6. And he's clearly not at that level in terms of talent. And I think the issue is that he shoots inefficiently, right? He takes the more points than shot tags. Right, where somebody has more shots than points, this is a really bad thing. And again, here, if you want to make the argument that they need somebody to take the shots, they've already got DeMar DeRozan, who's actually a sight better in terms of percentage for that. And they got all these guys, what happened? They got rid of them, and their centers went off, and their power forward went off in terms of scoring because they were getting the ball. I mean, Rudy Gay is not somebody who's going to help you win basketball games by playing hero ball. And that said,
but let's actually move on to the point of contention because you and I agree on this. I think anybody who's read us for years knows we think this. I think I have been just bassing Vivek. I hope I'm saying that right because our Vivek, that's how we say his name. I've heard people pronounce it Vivek Ranadiv, who now owns the Kings. He was lauded in Malcolm Gladwell's recent book, David and Goliath, based on a New Yorker piece he wrote years ago where he transformed his daughter's basketball team. I am just unimpressed with what he's done with the Spurs. I am super depressed. This out of an analytics guy. You think he's okay?
Yeah, I think actually, I mean, they need to make a splash, and I actually think, and again, with the following caveats, I think this could. It's a dangerous marriage. It's like very dangerous substances put together because now they've got a team with Derek Williams, Rudy Gay, and DeMarcus Cousins not only sharing court but starting. This is one of those things that either works like gangbusters or blows up. Now, again, with the following caveat, I think it could work if if having Cousins with Gay keeps Gay from taking a crazy amount of dumb shots because their offense runs through Boogie, and if having Gay on the team keeps Cousins from taking dumb mid-range jumpers, which is really not good at, and just sticking to the post, then I think it actually work. I think also, I mean, if they play a specific style in terms of, they're all these athletes. If they run out there, if they press, if they do certain things, it could work. Again, I think it's one of those things where they're taking a shot in the dark, and given that they're Sacramento, I think I understand why they're doing.
I think shot in the dark perfectly sums up the San Antonio, or not San Antonio, the Sacramento offense.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, again, I think I'm curious to see it. I actually think, from this fantasy perspective, I own the Marcus Cousins in a few leagues, and I kind of think this makes him better because I think he'll take less dumb shots. Whether everything else works, I don't know, but I do kind of hope that it makes him better at least. Plus, it gets more playing time for Isaiah Thomas, who's actually pretty good.
I mean, well, that's the problem is this team had a few decent pieces, right? And the trade I really was against was the Luke. I'm gonna completely mess up his last name.
Luke Muabuabute, I think is his name.
Yeah, that trade was ridiculous. The fact is they had a decent team. It wasn't going to be a great team. And in the West, the last thing you want to hear is mediocre. That's the depressing part, right? If you're in the West and you don't have 4 really, really good starting caliber players, you're not going anywhere. So me telling you you've got one good starter and a few average starters shouldn't make you optimistic. But they've just gone for yay points, and I'm just depressed about it.
Well, I mean, I think here's the other thing. You might be able to move, and again, most traded player in the league, you might be able to move Gay's contract to get when his contract is up in a sign and trade. So at least it's an asset moving further on down the line. I mean, I think. They've got Boogie, who's already the all-potential guy. And again, Boogie's one of those guys, I think he eventually is going to get it, and when he gets it, he's going to be deadly. And he shows flashes of that. As I said, Isaiah Thomas is good.
To be fair, we've been saying that about Melo for years, though. Melo is another one of those players with potential that hasn't figured it out.
The difference between Melo and Boogie Cousins is that Melo happened to play with a really good coach in terms of scheme and offense and a really stable organization. And despite that, and despite the fact that his coach out and out took shots at him for making dumb decisions, he never learned. And whereas Boogie's played on really dysfunctional teams, even down in college. I'm a Georgia Tech guy, and he played on a really dysfunctional Georgia Tech team, and he's never had a decent organization team around him. I think this could be a Zach Randolph thing. And again, he shows flashes. It's one of those guys where he just gets frustrated and does dumb things. But again, if you could take him and put him on somebody, if you gave him to Greg Popovich, he would be a menace.
Greg Popovich, there are two teams which are kind of interesting. Greg Popovich and the New York Knicks are kind of two teams that I almost consider cheat codes on both ends, where Greg Popovich you give him anybody, right? Marco Bellinelli looks good. I was panning that trade, and Marco Bellinelli shooting amazing from 3. You mentioned system, and
it's a very specific thing where they need a guy who plays a certain role to shoot to basically play in the system and shoot the shots. And if you've got a guy who's used to playing on dumb offenses who don't actually get him the shots, right? And you put in a system that's specifically designed to get him open looks, they're guys who just make 40-50% of that, and Marco Bellinelli is one of those guys. He's not going to work on a classic NBA offense because they're not drawing up the plays properly. But you put him on something like the Spurs or the Heat, or I think another team that runs really smart offense. I think the Mavs do somewhat of a good job there too. He's going to get open looks. He's going to get better. So it's sometimes system-specific type of players work, and I think it's the same kind of thing for a big man like Boogie, where he's never actually been in a system that's kind of I don't think he's ever had somebody to tell him, hey, don't do that he's actually going to listen to.
Well, actually, back to both Boogie and Rudy Gay, this may actually just be something you can't get around, which is both of these players obviously don't care about playing for winning teams.
Yeah.
They haven't for most of their career. They're doing what they need to do.
Not the case for Rudy, 100%. But keep going.
Yeah, but I mean, they're doing what they need to do to get paid, and I have no problem with that. Now, on that note, we're talking about poor players, poor shooters. We're talking about Rudy Gay. If we want to talk about players that are looking good, that do shoot well, Patrick did a post, and we had some contention here, talking Wesley Matthews and which players are really improving. So, for instance, is DeMarcus Cousins actually improving this season, or do we have players that are improving that are going under the radar?
Yeah,
and were there any names on Patrick's post for the most improved that shocked you, or any names you think were missing? So if you're missing
he didn't make enough hay of Michael Beasley, who was the number one player on his list, and who was actually kind of back to form. And Michael Beasley is a player I harp on because my model loved him. I think he actually has one of the I've been doing a draft model since 1990, like in terms of running the numbers since like the 90s, and he's one of the guys. He's top 5 in terms of his projection, but for whatever reason, I think part of it is because he's a bit of a head case, and he was in really bad teams that were putting him in the wrong roles. He hasn't been as good as he was in college, and I think he was good when he was in Miami. Or he was decent as a rookie in Miami, and apparently there's something that Coach Spo is doing, which is getting him to what he needs to do, which is play under the post, get rebounds.
Actually, I want to give Mosey Platt some credit here, because he had talked some about good coaching. And so, for instance, Phil Jackson showed up as a name there. Is it possible playing on a team with the big three where basically you are not – if you're DeMarcus Cousins and Rudy Gay in Sacramento, you can take 40 shots a game combined, and no one's going to tell you anything. You can just ignore the coach, too. They'll get fired. On Miami, though, you've got LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh. You've got these big names that are established that can just say you're not allowed to do stupid stuff like you were in Minnesota.
Well, I think it's important to, does a player actually have talent? I think that's kind of important. Is it like, have we seen production from this player at some point in his life? And we'd seen production, significantly great production from Michael Beasley when he was in college, right? And we saw decent production when he was in Miami. So there was enough evidence for you to say, hey, there's a chance that this guy's being used poorly by bad organizations, and they're putting him in a position to kind of, they're asking him to be Rudy Gay. That's what they were doing. And getting back to, it's like, take all these crazy shots and do all these dumb things, where really if he's in a specific role in a specific system and there's an environment, the proper environment, then he's going to behave properly. And I think this happens in business too. Certain organizations are going to get more out of players just specifically because that's the way the organization is, right? You're going to behave a lot better if you're playing for the Spurs or the Heat than you are if you're playing for the Knicks. If you're playing for the Knicks, you're getting the ball, you're taking a shot. You don't give a damn.
Yeah, we're going to need to get Sports Aptitude, I believe is what the organization was called, back on the podcast when we were talking Drummond and grooming players. Because, yeah, Michael Beasley is just one of these players where we agreed. We thought he had all the talent in the world, similar to Melo, all the talent in the world, and just was squandering it. What was going to happen? Well, now, here's a few other funny names. Like, for instance, Patrick said, Bargnani has gone from being the worst player in the league to being bad, so he improved. But he pruned the list. A name I want to bring up that's just been... I
think I want to say the point on Bargnani is, like, we've seen enough evidence. I think partly is because they've been putting him underneath the basket and making it easy for him on defense. Like, when people actually run sets and move the ball around, he's a freaking disaster. So, I mean, he's been okay, but he's not. Calling him the most improved player is stretching it a bit.
Well, no, I thought that was a funny name. I was scrolling through the list to talk about, and I think it's funny to go, you are not the worst player in the NBA, how you've improved, but...
You're not, let's be quantified, you're not the worst player that we've ever seen in the database anymore.
I think he still holds it like all time, but anyway, I don't want to get too hung up on that.
Yeah.
Another name, this guy is just perplexing to me, and I just don't understand. I think I might call him the sine wave, which is Spencer Hawes, who just shows flashes of greatness one season, terrible the next. He's playing amazing this season. It's, the ebbs and flows of the 76ers success.
Him and Danny Green, he's still been off and on this season too, where, like, sometimes he's awesome, sometimes he's great. I think part of the problem is, like, one, he's been hurt lately. So, and a couple other guys have been hurt on that team. So he's not getting the open looks he was getting from 3 earlier in the season. If the full complement of players for that team shows up, it opens up his game somewhat. He's got a little bit of Matt Bonner in his game where, like, he's taking all these set shots, but it's set shots off, Michael Carter Williams doing penetration and whatnot. So it does depend on some other things. Now, again, his game is he has an interesting game. I think he's a guy who's definitely a guy who'd be really good on a good team. But when you kind of in the middle of like what's happening right now, where like they're taking all these players out, it does make it rougher for him to actually be really good. So I mean, again, I think this is one of these guys that if you he's a guy, put him on the Spurs, fantastic. Put him on the Heat, fantastic.
So I'm curious about this and your thoughts about what's going to end up in the end of the season. So I'm looking at Patrick's final list. We already talked about Michael Beasley, but only two players when you were talking about seeing talent. Wes Matthews and Paul George are two players that we've seen greatness or flashes of greatness in the past, or good play. And they've kind of stepped it up this season. But we have a lot of mediocre players in the past: Bellinelli, Biyombo, Jordan Crawford, Rashard Lewis. I think he's too old. I'm curious if that even holds up. Patrick Mills. How many of these players are actually going to stay up where they're at? I mean, we're a little over a quarter of the way through the season. We have some teams playing better than we expected, some playing worse. For these most improved, how many of them are actually going to stay improved like we're seeing?
Actually, I think Michael Beasley, I was going to say, because of the fact of the system. I think Bellinelli is a guy who's going to stay up there.
But he's playing star level. He's playing star level.
Yeah, but if you look at the way that system runs and how everybody plays at the star level for San Antonio, I think he's a player who's built for that system, and I think he's going to continue to be built for that system. That's not going to change. I think one that's really interesting, which you haven't talked about, is Jordan Crawford. Salman, you and I went to see Jordan Crawford play live at the Boston Garden. They're playing the Celtics were playing the Warriors, and I remember turning to you and saying like, "Wow, I've never disliked a Celtic more than I dislike Jordan Crawford," because he was just terrible. He was a ball chucker. He was doing all sorts of crazy things, and somehow Brad Stevens gets in there, looks at him, and says like, "You're not a 2 guard, you're a 1 guard," and he's a top 5 point guard right now. And if you watch the games, it's actually been kind of scary. He's actually playing D on the ball. He's pressing. He's doing smart things. It's kind of insane, actually. Again, coaching.
I was going to say, I remember Jamal and Jordan Crawford. I just used to confuse them last season. The Jay Crawford from NBA.com as both just being horrendous chuckers. Doesn't look like Jamal Crawford has followed suit. I'm trying to think if there's any other names that I'm really interested in. The Morris guys, because there's 2 of them, and they're both
the Morris twins, but that's kind of no. That's kind of weird.
I'm just curious because this is some major improvement on these players. Patrick sent this out. This is above an average. All of these players that he's got listed on this list of 10 to 15 names have improved over an average player's performance. And I'm still curious how well it holds up. Like the same thing, Wes Matthews is playing star level. I just question if he can keep shooting 3 points at this range.
I think they wrote a great post on it, which is he's not Will Chamberlain. Right, so I don't think he's going to break Wilt Chamberlain's record for effective field goal in the season. So I think he's going to come back down to earth somewhat. And I think the Blazers are a really good team, but they're not quite as good as they're showing right now. I think that team still comes. I still believe that team comes down to earth somewhat.
Well, I looked at both the Pacers and the Blazers, and they both looked like they were regressing a little, except the Blazers had one edge, which is they just destroyed the Utah Jazz 2 of the last 3 games.
Well, but it's like if you're a guard, play the Knicks. If you're a Western Conference team, play the Jazz.
All right. So on that note, we're talking most improved, and where this goes really well into. There's one name on the most improved list which I'm curious about. So I released our MVP list earlier today. Mm-hmm. And what I commented on that list was basically we got 3 names because there are 3 players that are just head and shoulders above the rest. One name that I keep throwing out there as a possible dark horse candidate to unseat the king from his throne is Paul George. Paul George is playing at star level. He's on both our MIP list, and if I were a little more polite, he would have been on our MVP list. So in terms of MVP, what did you think about those 3 names? Do you think I snubbed George not putting him on? Do you think he's for real?
I think here's the thing. He's playing at an extremely high level. He's not quite at LeBron's level.
He's nowhere close. Even at this high level, he's not even close to LeBron.
Again, it comes down to this. It's like how many games is Indiana going to wind up winning? With the East being as crappy as it is, that could end up being something like 65. It's like the Pacers could win 68 games this year. right? So, and if the Pacers win 68 games this year, then Paul George keeps scoring and playing at the rate he's playing, there's a real good shot that he could win. Particularly if like the Heat kind of say, here's the thing, like the magic number for the Heat to win the division might actually, I think they've got 16 wins, might be 24. So I think something like if they win 45 games, they might be guaranteed a 2 seed. So it's one of those things where
if the one seed's out of range, we already know that LeBron James in the playoffs.
If Indiana wins 68 games, Miami just says screw it, and we're going to win 48. I'm trying to keep it clean, Andre. I'm editing myself. So if that happens, then I mean, there's a real shot that Paul George wins the MVP. And again, this is basically just like LeBron in Miami saying, we don't care, whatever, and then just kind of playing all these trumps in the middle of the season, and maybe LeBron goes out for 15 minutes a game to keep himself warm. So that could actually happen.
In terms of LeBron, I made a comment that I keep making, and I just want to clarify this. He's playing incredible this season. He's just keeping it up. Is LeBron James? I think he should remain the MVP if he keeps it up like this at the season. Has he cemented himself as like the greatest ever at this point? I keep racking my head at just the era he's playing and the strength of competition he's playing against and the level and versatility he's showing.
It's a tougher league. He plays 5 positions. He can guard the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, and the 5. And again, and people are arguing, oh no, the rings and the championships. If you go age by age, at this age, he has won. Like if you look at, and again, ignore his first 3 seasons because we got to go from when he was 22, 22 to now. He's won more MVP awards than Michael Jordan. He's won more Finals MVP than Michael Jordan. He's won more rings than Michael Jordan. He's been in more Finals than Michael Jordan, and more Eastern Conference Finals than by any measure you want to throw out. He has been better than Michael Jordan through a comparable period of his career. And again, he plays all 5 positions. He can do anything you want him to do on the court. I think the only straight comp you can make for LeBron, like the only guy who has an argument, is Magic Johnson. And Magic Johnson wasn't even close to being the defender that LeBron James is.
Yeah, and not only that, I mean, the other thing about Magic is later in his, so this will be the interesting part, is the end of their I think they're kind of in the same age.
I'm not hating on MJ. This is not about hating on MJ.
Oh no,
MJ is fantastic. It's just go ahead.
I'm just saying, I would argue LeBron pulled harder than Magic Johnson did thus far. At this point in their respective careers is when Magic Johnson became pretty much the only real player on those Lakers teams. But more of his career, LeBron James has been the man on his team.
All I'm gonna say is, like, I think that 2007 Cavs team that he took to the finals is crappier than any team crappier than any team probably that Magic ever played on, and crappier than any team that Jordan ever took to the finals. I mean, that team is comparable to, like, if Jordan had taken like the 87 or 88 Bulls to the finals. I mean, they would have gotten killed, but if he'd done that, and that's kind of people kind of. They're looking at it wrong from a career, but if you look at it year to year and what he's done to this point in his career, I mean, LeBron's numbers are just ridiculous. I mean, like, he's going for his 5th MVP in 6 years. I mean, and again, he's been the best player in the league for that period of time, maybe a little longer than that. And as I said, he can play any position. He can basically do anything you want him to do on a basketball court. If you were starting a franchise and you could pick one guy, he would have to be the guy. I mean, there's really no argument.
So unfortunately, I don't think we're going to have much to disagree on the other 2 names. The other 2 names I listed were CP3, Chris Paul, and Andre Drummond. Do you have any complaint? I'm actually curious. Like, I'm surprised I didn't get any pushback with it. I was like, I'm going to give 3 names, and I'm gonna just forfeit our 4th and 5th vote because I don't think anybody else belongs.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. You're throwing out, I think LeBron and CP3 are the 2 best players in the league, right? So, I mean, I'd throw that out there. I think I would have thrown out Kevin Love. I think part of the problem with Kevin Love is I don't know that his team is going to – I think he's got a better team than he's had for a while.
But that's not saying much.
Well, but I mean, I think they're a team that if they were in the East, he'd had a better shot because in the East he might be a 3 seed and then kind of challenge Miami because Miami won't care. But in the West, that team, might be with the Warriors sitting there at 48, 49 wins and just sitting on the outside looking in, kind of sad, which would be really sad. I think there's an argument to be made for Iguodala if he was healthy. because of how impactful he's been for that Warriors team. They're a different team when he plays. And,
I think Iguodala and Davis are two names that have just played great this season. I just think they're just not going to be healthy enough to.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I mean, I wouldn't throw Davis in there because, again, one crappy team and he's still too young and he's still kind of informed. A couple years, yeah. I think I said Kevin Love. I think you said Drummond. I wish he shot better than 15% from free throws.
He's shooting like 33% from three, and he still has a 60% true shooting.
Yeah, it's from free throw. So I'm kind of, I wish, and I think he's going to get better. I think Drummond, there may be a year where it's just he does a Shaq thing and just kind of, he's the MVP and forget about it, and that's how good he actually is. I'm thinking if there's any other name I would throw out there, I think it's no. I mean, I think that's it because
no KD, no Kevin Durant.
Well, I mean, again, it comes down to this. I think it might be one of those seasons where like Kevin has like a really great season, but that for him to win, so for Kevin Durant to win the MVP, right? His team would have to be the number 1 seed in the West, right? So clearly, it would have to be the dominant team in the West, and they would have to be we're getting into the territory where they'd have to be within shouting distance of Indiana, because then if not, then it becomes a Paul George thing. I'm talking about what would happen for the voters. I think it is KD, Paul George, and LeBron. And again, it's LeBron's to lose, and if for LeBron to lose it, basically Miami has to lie down for the last 20 games of the season.
Which, as you mentioned, is possible. Which is possible if Indiana's 10+ games out from them at that point, and they've locked up the 2 seed. That will be really sad.
They just might say in February, it's like, hey, Dwayne, here's a plane ticket. Go to Germany. Come back for the playoffs.
All right. So I liked all that. I was going to say let's do what we've got 3 minutes left in the show. I'm actually going to leave LaMarcus Aldridge out. I'm going to say we'll save that for another day because we could go a full 30 minutes on our disagreement with LaMarcus Aldridge. I'm going to say you got 3 minutes left. Are there any? I've always enjoyed at the end of the show we've kind of done this things that surprise you. So I'm going to say I'll throw one to you and then I'll take back. What's something that surprised you about this season thus far since we've last spoken?
Things that have surprised me since last spoken. How good the Celtics defense actually is. We were talking about this a little bit, where like they're somehow pulling together a top 10 defensive season without a center, which they're playing 6'9" Jared Sullinger at center, which I was giving Sullinger a lot of crap in terms of his numbers, but when I started looking at, he's a power forward 6'9", he's playing center. I mean, he's not pulling great numbers for center, but his team is playing great D. So I mean, that's a surprise, I think, and how good that team actually looks and how well coached that team is. I think that's kind of surprising. I think how quickly and how bad the Knicks situation has been. Whereas, I mean, I thought they were going to be bad, but I didn't quite expect it to be this much of a tire fire at this point of the season, right? I thought they were going to kind of get there. I didn't think they were going to be quite as. I mean, like losing by 41 points to the Celtics at home is just kind of. Oh, and then following that up by getting blown out by the Cavs, and the Cavs are really bad. I mean, it's probably two of the worst losses of the season.
I want them to do a horrible trade with Chandler. And do they have anybody? I mean, Prigioni is good, but he's really old. Do they have any other assets other than Chandler at this point?
Shumpert. They got Shumpert.
Yeah, Shumpert's good. Yeah, not fantastic.
They're not. They don't even have their picks at this point, so it's kind of you kind of watching and going like, there's not much for the Knicks to do at this point. It's I mean, I think. Again, if we're going to talk surprises, I would say that probably I knew that Rudy Gay was going to get traded. I didn't quite expect it to happen so fast, and how fast Masai.
I was going to say you're cheating because you've done like 3 now. That would be mine. Like Masai, I miss him so much. Like I didn't. I didn't know I could.
You like this. I'm surprised by how quickly. Shaw has been able to get a good defense up in Denver. Is how he's been able to transfer his system to Denver. They're looking like a good defensive team now.
You've got Fareed on your fantasy team. Is he actually getting his minutes up? Because he's playing great. Yeah. He's playing the same way he has been.
Yeah, no, but again, I mean, like the defensive system is what's been surprising. That team was a head case in terms of defense, and they've been much better this year.
Yeah, well, they also had a lot of new people, and I think Iguodala, it's kind of like losing in general. And I mean, if you're going to talk leadership, and I
Oh,
mean,
he was only the fourth best player on that team last year, according to the Denver beat writer.
Was that Kisla?
Kisla, yeah.
I stopped following. I got in an argument. Okay, so this is the story I ended. I was talking to Kisla once, and I told him his metrics were stupid, and he said no, he understood the math. I was like, really, you understand the math? So I pressed him on it, and he's like, well, no. I don't. My brother
his brother-in-law went to MIT, and he understands the metrics.
Yeah, whatever. I don't buy it. I think you should call up MIT, Mark's brother, and ask for a refund if you're telling Mark what he says. And yeah, I stopped following him on Twitter. I can't follow Denver beat writers. It's why I'm so happy Tammy's back on. So Brian, where are we at on time? I think you said we had about 3 minutes left. Should I shout us out? You're okay. Any slogan we want to end? We need to think of a closing slogan, a catchphrase to send out. Got any thoughts, Arturo? I'll let you send us out with whatever slogan you want to say.
Feliz Navidad, próspero año y felicidad.